information within the limitations of town staffing and resources. Action items developed from tonight's session will be used to drive future activities related to project communication. We sincerely thank you for participating and sharing your ideas, especially at this very busy time of year. Julia?
Okay, thank you so much, Libby. So again, people are really appreciative of folks being here and of your time. I've shared with you a little bit about what we hope to accomplish tonight. And now it's time for the ABCs of PFAS. So just so we're all kind of singing from the same song sheet, I'm going to turn it over to Eric. And I'm going to just say Eric because we haven't really met, and I asked you to turn off your ceiling fan, and thank you for that, but I still don't know how to say your last name right. I don't want to murder it like I would saying PFAS. So Eric, tell us who you are and tell us a little bit about PFAS.
Great. Thanks, Julia. Thanks, everybody. So I am Eric Spargimino with CDM Smith. We've been working with the town now on this PFAS issue. So with that, let's get into the ABCs of PFAS. So when thinking and talking about PFAS,
Shouldn't I be able to see the?
It's important to recognize that we're talking about a family of compounds. As of today, actually, when I checked the EPA website, there are 9,252 of these compounds. So when we started working with the town on this, there was about 3,000 known compounds. And when we talk about these compounds, they're generally characterized into two families: PFOS, which is perfluorooctane sulfonic acid, and PFOA, perfluorooctanoic acid. And both under that PFAS family are recognized by that fluorine carbon bond. And that bond is one of the strongest bonds in chemistry. And it's a man-made bond. These are man-made chemicals. These are not naturally occurring. And on the left there is a little picture of the molecule. So next slide, please. So when we talk about these compounds, it's important to understand that they are in our environment now. They were first introduced in the 1940s and became very popular in the 1950s forward. And they're used in a wide range of consumer and industrial applications. And they're known as a little bit of a miracle substance. These are your non-stick cookware. This is what allows the cake or the eggs to slide off the pan. This is the firefighting foam that puts out fires and keeps us safe. This is the lining of the popcorn microwave bags. That little piece of paper that goes under the pizza that stops the grease from getting on your front seat. The waterproof jacket, this is what makes it waterproof, and the stain resistant material in carpets. This is everywhere. It's in the synthetic fertilizers that you buy from Home Depot and put on your garden and lawn. And it's when we talk about it, it's not so much that we can, or that most people want to ban these products, because many people love these products. So when we talk about them, we want to think about the responsible use of these products. So with that, next slide. So on the left here, you can see I listed some of these compounds or some of these sources, and these are our primary sources. So as I said, the firefighting foam, the electronics, the waterproofing, the nonstick cookware. And then when those compounds and all of our garbage from our homes goes into the landfill, it turns into landfill leachate. And the food packaging, as I said. And then we have our PFAS clients. Those clients are the ones that get those sources, and that's the airports with the firefighting foam, the landfill, as I said, with the material that comes to them, the Department of Defense bases and the different uses that they need these compounds for, and the industrial sites that utilize these chemicals to make different products. Now, how do they get into the environment? So whether by use or by accident, they end up in runoff from receiving streams. They can end up in groundwater. Whether it's from our own septic systems in our homes, to fertilizers that we irrigate into the lawn, to when we flush the toilet, that goes to the wastewater treatment plant. Because PFAS are ubiquitous in the environment now. Then we need to think about the exposure pathways to the right in green. So is it a direct exposure pathway? And that's where we talk about drinking water and when it goes to the water treatment plant. That's a very direct exposure pathway. The toxicology of some of these compounds is very well understood. and that's when we'll talk about the limits in a couple slides. But it's important, but that is a primary importance because it is direct exposure. You're drinking that. Then when we think about wastewater and biosolids, that's an indirect exposure pathway. No one's drinking wastewater, no one's eating biosolids, but that is potentially getting into the groundwater. Potentially you're using the biosolids for a fertilizer for your gardens. So there's indirect exposures. And these compounds, there's so many of them in nature, and the science is so new that we're still trying, the scientific community is still trying to understand those exposure pathways and the toxicology as they interact with humans. And then of course, there's airborne exposure pathways. So we don't have a lot of industry in Nantucket, but the mainland does. And some of that, and some of those industries do have stacks, and we don't necessarily know which of those stacks may be emitting PFAS, but it's reasonable to believe that some are, and travel, multiple miles. Next slide, please. So the current understanding of PFAS and its health impacts. If we were to take a blood sample from everyone in this room, it's very likely that we would find PFAS in all of our blood. That's how ubiquitous these compounds are in the environment. Just the other day, my sister-in-law said, I got a new car seat for the baby and I made sure to have no PFAS in it, but now it's also extremely flammable too. So it's that give and take of these compounds. But fortunately, many of these compounds that have been studied, like PFOS and PFOA, have been phased out of production and use. So we've already seen a decline since 1999 in concentrations of these compounds in people's bloods. However, many of these fluorine-based compounds are still being replaced as those longer chain compounds get phased out. So having PFAS exposure in your body does not necessarily mean you have a health problem or will have a health problem, but that's part of that advancing the science, because we do have good information in toxicology on a handful of these compounds that do have detrimental health impacts, but some of them, the industry, the scientists that are studying this just don't understand yet. Some of the health impacts that we've seen in animal studies linked to PFAS are fertility issues and pregnancy-induced hypertension and preeclampsia, increased risk of thyroid disease, changes in immune system, increased cholesterol levels, increased risk of cancer, especially kidney and testicular cancer. And then, as I said, overall scientific and medical evidence is conclusive for many compounds, but for the majority of these 9,000 plus compounds is still inconclusive in being studied. And to put it in perspective too, when we talk about these compounds, they're being monitored at the parts per trillion level, which is a level that really hasn't been approached before at this scale. One eye drop in an Olympic swimming pool is a part per trillion, to give it that sort of scale perspective. Usually when we talk about drinking water and wastewater and things like that, we're in the parts per million, not even parts per billion, but parts per million. So next slide, please. So on the regulatory level, Massachusetts DEP has actually been really, really proactive on this. So the Massachusetts Contingency Plan, or MCP, Site Cleanup Standards for Groundwater and Soil, promulgated in December 2019, and that's 310 CMR 40. And the drinking water maximum contaminant level, or MCL, was set at, or promulgated in October 2020, was set at 20 parts per trillion for the sum of 6 compounds. And similarly, that MCP is also for the same 6 compounds. And it's these 6 compounds listed here on this second bullet, because those are the compounds that Mass DEP has very good toxicological data for, and we understand really well. Mass DEP is continuing to do a lot of research on this. It's really an impressive effort that they're putting forward, especially being one of the first in the country to really dive into this to this scale. And they're looking at sampling procedures and looking at monitoring at wastewater and residuals for products such as the compost that we have here, co-compost that we have here in Nantucket. And then just recently, on July 21st, on the federal level, PFAS Action Act 201 HR 2476 just passed in the House of Representatives. That's a very significant act for PFAS nationally because it requires EPA to establish a national drinking water standard for PFOA and PFOS within 2 years. Granted, Massachusetts already has one, so we're ahead of the game there. And then it's going to designate PFOA and PFOS chemicals as hazardous substances, as well as designating PFOA and PFOS as hazardous air pollutants within 180 days, and require EPA to place discharge limits on industrial releases of PFAS and provide $200 million annually for wastewater treatment, and prohibit unsafe incineration of PFAS waste and place a moratorium on the introduction of new PFAS into commerce, and then requiring comprehensive PFAS health testing. So next slide, please. So how is PFAS released in our environment? We have our aqueous film forming foams, which is also known as AFFF, or the firefighting foams, manufacturing emissions, landfill leachate, and wastewater and residuals. And it's important to note with these bottom two, landfill leachate and wastewater residuals, that our landfill at Nantucket, as well as our wastewater treatment plants at Nantucket, are receiving these compounds. They're not producing them, they're not using them in their processes, they're receiving them from us, the residents. They're coming through the collection system, they're coming in the garbage bags, and they're ending up at these facilities. And it's right now we're working with the town to figure out how to manage these appropriately. So next slide, please. So this slide shows the PFAS cycle for any town USA. So if you look on the left here, this is the wastewater treatment plant, and you can see all the arrows that go into it, because these are those PFAS sources that might end up at the treatment plant. From whether it's an industrial site or firefighting foam on the bottom left in red, or our septic systems that get pumped out occasionally, or if we're on the on town collection system that goes through the pipes. And eventually that gets discharged from the treatment plant, whether it's through the effluent that ends up in surface water or groundwater, or to the biosolids that end up in the landfill and we're ending up in the co-compost. And then that potentially could end up in the soils, whether by applying as a fertilizer or a garden to use to grow vegetables. And then you can see going to the right in blue, once it's in the soil and the groundwater, it ends up at the water treatment plant, it ends up in our drinking water wells and our irrigation wells and infiltration basins, which sort of brings the cycle back full circle, and ends up back in our homes, which ends up back in the wastewater treatment plants. So next slide, please. So something that we've been working on with the town for the past year or so is creating a town-wide PFAS cycles that's specific to Nantucket. So I won't try to follow all the arrows on this with everyone, but I encourage everyone to go on the town's website where this is posted, along with a lot of other fantastic information. But this is in the sum. To summarize, this is all the PFAS sources and that we've been able to identify throughout the island and where they're going. So on the top left, we have the residents, the commercial users, the businesses in green, and then in tan below that is the wastewater treatment plants. Below that is the airport in red, and then in the middle there in yellow is the co-compost facility and the landfill. In the middle and to the right is in gray there is are the oceans, the surface water, shellfish, soils, gardens, basically where all those compounds may potentially be going. And then to the right is in light blue, sorry about that. In light blue are our domestic wells, our drinking water plant and irrigation wells. And then most importantly, bottom right in green is those human exposure pathways.
Is that your dog, Eric, that's making an appearance?
Yes, that is my dog. Sorry about that.
Dog. So tell us the dog's name. It's very vocal.
Her name is Chili, and she gets very excited whenever anyone comes up the driveway.
Oh, I thought it was because she was excited about PFAS. Okay, well then carry
Well,
on.
that too. That was probably the first part.
All right,
Thank you, Julia. Sorry about that.
no problem.
So next slide, please. So the PFAS realm is changing daily. So what can we do? And really, this is where, and you're going to hear more from them later, but where the town has been just tremendously proactive. And we have these groups like the PFAS Action Group that's been phenomenal. at some of these things that I'm going to talk through. But source control. We need to educate ourselves. We need to get aware of the different sources of PFAS and in our consumer choices, and then how they potentially could end up in the environment. So we can think about these things a little more responsibly than we had before. And what the town's doing and the PFAS Action Group is, we need to monitor ongoing research and those toxicological studies that are being done, so that we know whether Mass DEP is regulating or not, if we are comfortable that they're doing enough. And then, follow the regulatory and policy developments, both nationally and locally, so that we can also be a source of education for the state and for the federal government. Because, as someone entrenched in PFAS every day, I know I reach out to the regulators constantly just to educate them on the things that I learn and I understand. And then, maybe most importantly, understand the risks and communicate that risk throughout the town, so that everyone in Nantucket understands, what the different risks are with these compounds and what we're finding in the data that we're collecting. And then certainly, research and development, things that, many of the scientists continue to do just to develop the state of the practice here. So with that, I'll be available for questions and answers, but thank you very much for everyone.
Thank you, Eric. I've heard a few presentations on PFAS, and I have to say you really very much kind of made this simple and succinct for people to understand. They come from all the things in life we love: stain-resistant carpet, nonstick pans, all these things help us put out fires, and the town is collecting them at their facilities on behalf of all of you, and now we got to figure out how to deal with it. So great job, Eric, and I'm going to turn it over to Chuck to talk about what the town is doing.
Okay. Yeah. Thanks, Julia. And thanks, Eric. That was just a wonderful presentation on the background. So I have 5 slides to provide a quick update on town activities related to PFAS. And this is not intended to be a full review of each activity, but rather project highlights of the work being performed, and more importantly, trying to stay within a 10-minute time limit. And the first update is concerning the Nantucket Airport, and the airport is conducting a PFAS investigation that started in 2020 and falls under the Massachusetts Contingency Plan, and also Mass DEP's Bureau of Waste-Side Cleanup. This work is being managed by the airport, specifically the Airport Commission and Airport Administration. And Noah Carberg, who's the project manager on the airport side, was not available to attend tonight, and sends the following update. As an identified release site, they're working with their consultants and a licensed site professional regarding the site investigation, managing the installation of water service to impacted homes, providing bottled water, also treatment systems as required. The latest information from the airport is available on their website, shown there, ac-pfas.com. And so these are just some of the highlights. I think the thing worth mentioning is probably the last bullet on the right there. PFAS detected at the airport is believed to be related to the use of firefighting foam. However, as we see in that recent testing done, there is some contamination that may be coming onto airport property from upstream. And so that's currently part of the investigation. I know Noah's and his team are collecting that information, and that information is available on their website. Next slide, please. As a means to show all PFAS related activities happening on Nantucket, I have a slide with the major work underway. And this was originally presented at the Select Board on July 7th and has been updated slightly. 5 projects to PFAS, and I will try to touch on each of them. The airport, I just covered that. Wannacomet Water is required by Mass DEP to be testing the public water supply, and the information about that's shown in the chart here. It's the municipal wells. It's being managed by the drinking water section of Mass DEP. And that's quarterly testing that's being done. And that information is being posted on the PFAS website. And quarterly testing for Sconset is actually going to start next month. And Mark is available to answer any questions if we have any later on. Moving on, the next question, the next topic is really the work and testing being done by Waste Options and the town, the Department of Public Works, as required by the approval of suitability permit issued by Mass DEP. The testing of compost material is being done at a Mass DEP approved lab and started October 2020. We also have quarterly samples collected in January, May, and that will continue indefinitely. Testing results and fact sheets are provided on the town's website with this information. As you'll see, working with Mass DEP, it's another section, the solid waste section. You will note that, compared to the airport and the Warner Comet project, there aren't necessarily any standards that exist for the concentration of PFAS in co-compost. And the intent is that with the information that Nantucket and other towns are collecting, that's going to be something that comes shortly. And so while we talk about compost, it's easy to confuse the different materials that are available. The compost, the co-compost as being tested is not being made available to the public for their use. The compost material being distributed that you might see at the landfill is leaf and yard waste compost, which does not contain the biosolids and which does not contain municipal solid waste, and hence tends to have little or no concentration of ingredients going into the material. The next project is the more interesting one. It's the assessment in phase 2A with CDM Smith. And this is work that's not currently required by Mass DEP, unlike the airport, the water company, and Waste Options. So said another way, this is elective testing. And this is building on the work of phase 1 that we started with CDM Smith in the preliminary assessment that they did, looking islet and wide, focusing at town facilities. This was qualitative in nature, and there was no sampling or testing beyond what existed previously for information. Phase 2A is about developing a plan and an approach to sampling for PFAS at the landfill. There's no testing that's going to be happening in phase 2A. So the testing plan will be looking at surface water and groundwater and sampling for PFAS also in the wastewater facility. Shown, highlighted in yellow, is testing that we would like to discuss with Mass DEP to move forward with landfill capping. And this was a recent addition by George Aronson and his help organizing the solid waste projects after the departure of the DPW director. So we have many details to sort out. There's regulatory and testing protocols depending on the type of media being tested and the purpose of testing. And our next meeting with Mass DEP to discuss this matter is being scheduled for early September. Next project on the list is one that you hear about frequently, is the Mass DEP private wells testing program. And that's a program that's being made available statewide. Nantucket was selected as a community to participate. And through the program, Mass DEP and UMass have selected 40 homes for free testing. And sampling is done per the testing protocol. And the information will be made available to the homeowners in the town in terms of the results and potential next steps. Just got an update from UMass, and a total of 350 applications were submitted for Nantucket. So I think we knocked it out of the park. 40 were selected, of which 28 have signed agreements and are in the program. There are 12 that have not returned forms, and we are told that after 14 days, UMass will select replacements to reach the total of 40. And so of the 28 accepted with signed agreements, sampling kits are either being sent or have been delivered to those locations. And so there are no testing results available at this time. Next slide, please. And this slide is additional work related to PFAS that's going on. And this is important work, and it certainly builds upon what was presented in the last slide, but just shows the extent and the breadth of activities that are involved when we start talking about, PFAS and addressing contamination in the community. So the first item is the work by the airport to extend public water to the properties that are impacted as part of the MCP project. And so that information has been presented to the public. The Airport Commission had a meeting last week, and so those details are available, and we should reach out to the airport if we want to learn more about that. Along with providing public water per the needs of the MCP project, the water company and the town are looking at what it would take to supply water to the area west of the airport. And that is being pursued with the state's program, the state revolving fund. That came to us on rather short notice. Thanks to CDM Smith, they made us aware of it. And we're putting together an application, and we'll be submitting the information to the state with hopes that we'd be able to have access to the money to complete that construction. And I have a slide that helps clear some of this up in a minute. But as we're looking at expanding water service to not only west of the airport, but potentially other impacted parts of the island, there's a need that we've identified to really identify the larger water distribution needs and sources and capacity. And so we've put together a project with CDM Smith, and we're starting to look at that, and Mark can provide more information on that. Kind of following, anytime you put utilities in the road, are there other things that should be addressed in the road as well, such as sewer service or, street upgrades, bike paths, things like that. So in addition to really focusing on the water supply side, we're also looking, at a bigger picture in terms, if we're in there doing all this work, are there other things that make sense to do at the same time? Next item, just occasionally working with town council for information on the class action lawsuit that the town is pursuing with council. There's work that that's underway by Waste Options to make some operational changes to the compost operations, such that they're going to pursue the removal of additional materials from the municipal solid waste stream, such as pizza boxes and food packaging and potentially even food scraps, in order to really see the effect and how low we can bring the concentration of PFAS in the compost that comes from the co-composter, and without using the biosolids. And so I don't have any details in writing about this, other than that this is ongoing, and we're going to be, working with Waste Options to get a plan together and better understand it. And last, coordination with solid waste planning, as I mentioned earlier. George Aronson, a consultant with the town, previously put together a request for expressions of interest to get information to help us plan for the future of solid waste on Nantucket. And the current waste services agreement ends November 30th, 2025. That's right around the corner. And in addition with that, working with CDM Smith, we're also looking at the evaluation of technologies for the removal and destruction of PFAS in municipal solid waste, biosolids, leachate, et cetera. And you might have seen an earlier presentation from one of the companies that we were looking at, 374 Water. So there's just a little bit going on. And next slide, please. So coming back to the water extension around the airport, parts of this information I think have been shared previously, and then part of this is being put together for this SRF application that we're assembling. But very quickly, the lines are color coded. The red lines are the work that are being pursued by the airport to extend water to those homes that are impacted as identified by the MCP. The blue lines are existing water service, and water already exists in those areas. And then the green is the extension that we're pursuing through the additional work in the state revolving fund. To address concerns with some of the testing and results that we've seen from homeowners in the areas outside the area of where the airport is extending their water service. So, maybe we need to have we could come back to this at another time for maybe a more in-depth presentation of these details. And next slide. And last but not least, I'd like to recognize the PFAS Action Group with the assistance of Lydia Silver, and she's a summer intern and a master's degree student at Tufts University studying sustainable water management. We have made a connection with the PFAS Action Group. We've met with the Action Group via Zoom for several sessions. The first session was, about an hour, and it was a show and tell. And then we've had several follow-on sessions exploring the ways that, the town and the Action Group can do a better job with, communication and outreach to the community on the subject of PFAS. And I have to say that our work with them was really the catalyst to organizing this section, this session tonight. And so we look forward to continued coordination and working with them and others to really improve our ability to communicate the information about PFAS and what's happening here. And I want to pause here and provide an opportunity for Aisha and Jamie to maybe say a few words if they'd like to introduce themselves.
Hi, I'm Aisha Khan. How are you?
Hi, everybody. I'm Jamie Hunkawa. I'm a co-founder of the Nantucket PFAS Action Group. Thank you for the intro, Chuck. And thank you to the town for inviting us here today. We're really excited to be here. We're going to keep it short and sweet so we can get into these breakout sessions. But we are a community group that formed last summer with the mission of creating an educational resource for island residents to learn more about the hazards of PFAS on Nantucket, as well as work towards a completely PFAS-free environment. So we are actively for banning PFAS and getting them gone. We need to turn off that tap. So if you are interested in learning more about our work on the island or on a national level, please check out our website, pfasactiongroup.com, or you can follow us on Facebook and Twitter. We're at PFAS Action Group. And if you have any questions for us after the panel, or if you'd like to connect, please feel free to email us at pfasactiongroup@gmail.com.
Again, we would like to sincerely thank the town for inviting us to be on this panel and all those who have been working very hard to put this event together. Thank you. And we are encouraged that the town is open to hearing from residents like us today, and we hope to have some meaningful action and better understanding from this session. Thank you so much.
All right. Well, thank you, Jamie and Aisha, and thank you, Chuck and Eric. Great presentations. And now we want to go ahead and move into these small groups and learn what your interests are as Nantucket residents. The staff from the town that are here this evening are not going to be joining you in the breakout groups. The consultants won't be joining the breakout groups. Our team will be there to take the notes for you and bring them back, and we'll share all of that with the town and with the consultants. But we don't want the small groups to turn into a Q&A with the experts, so to speak. We want the small groups to be an opportunity for you as neighbors to talk about the concerns that you have. So what's about to happen, and the instructions are going to pop up, and I'm sure at this point in a pandemic, everyone has done this, but maybe you haven't. And we're going to give you an invitation to join a breakout group. Once you're in the breakout groups, our facilitators will have a series of questions to walk through with you. We'll be with you in those rooms for 20 minutes, and then magically you're all going to come back to this big room, and we'll do a little bit of Q&A to wrap up the evening session. So when you get that invitation, if you would just click yes, I'll hang out in the big room until everyone's gone their separate ways. Thank you. So those of you who are here with me in this big room are town staff at this point, or panelists, the PFAS action group. Jamie and Aisha, do you want to go to one of the breakout rooms?
Sure.
Yeah.
What would be best? What would you guys like?
So honestly, you're welcome to do whatever you're comfortable with. What I didn't want was for anyone who had kind of content knowledge, so to speak, to get put on the spot in the small group. And then it turns into this back and forth on some person's individual issues. If you want to go and be there to listen, that's great. But we're going to try to make sure we're just taking the notes and bringing everything back so the town and CDM Smith kind of have what they need to work on and work on with you all. So what would you prefer?
Well, then maybe we stay here.
Okay, stay here. We can play cards. We got 20 minutes. So
I just feel like people will start asking us a bunch of questions. And, we'll be like,
and that's why we planned it this way. So the folks whose names you see here are town staff members. Although Tammy, I'm sorry, I'm not recognizing your name. Is that?
Yeah.
Tammy, are you a member of the public? I think there's a few public people here.
Yeah, no, Tammy, Stephen is.
And Stephen and Arthur. Okay, I'm going to send you.
And Sandra, but Arthur, well, yeah, Arthur's member of the public. We'll let him, he's with the airport commission.
Oh, he's on the airport. Well, okay. I'll send you, Arthur, I'll send you to a room if you want. I hear, I see you're muted, but I'll send you to a room. Let's see if I can figure out how to do this. Yes, I can. Arthur, I'm assigning you. I'm just doing this randomly. You're going to Kelsey's group because she has the fewest people. And then bye. Let's see, Tammy. Off you go. Whoops. You just have to say yes when it comes to you. It's not showing up. Interesting. Oh, so Tammy has been invited but not joined. And Stephen has been invited but not joined. So Stephen and Tammy, if you would click to join your group one, if your group with Catherine, if you're having any trouble, you can, but they have been sent to groups already. Everyone else is staff. So do I need to send Sandra to a room? Yes. All right.
Yes.
Okay, I'm looking again. I think she's been assigned and just not accepted. Let me just try reassigning people.
Maybe they walked away from their computer.
Yeah, if they walked away, then they won't be able to So, okay, so hang out here, you guys talk amongst yourselves or not, and we'll be right back with you in a few minutes. I'm going to check in on some other.
Are we being recorded right now? Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
I think so, because the recording has to stay on for the whole meeting. The small groups don't get recorded though. It's not that good yet. So yeah, so be nice.
Yeah, Aisha, everything you say or do will be held against you in the court of law.
Noted.
So should we just mute this? Yeah.
Mark got tossed into one of the groups. I don't know if anyone can undo that, but he just sent me a text.
I think he can just leave the group and come back in here.
Thanks, Libby. I'll let him know.
I think that's how it could work.
Hi, Sean. I see you've just joined us. We're working in some small groups right now. We'll be back in about 10 minutes. The presentations have been recorded. So do you just want to hang out here until people come back?
Sure, I can do that. Thank you.
Hey, Sean.
Hi.
Apparently you have friends here. Hey, 508-228-0022. I moved you to the main room. I understand. I don't know who you are, but I heard you were a town staff member and you couldn't get out of the group because you were on your phone. If you want to go back, tell me, I'll move you back there, but I was doing that to be kind.
No,
Yep.
that's fine. Thank you very much. It's Mark from Wannacomet Water.
Hey, Mark, how are you?
I'm good.
Good, good. Good to hear your voice. Thank you.
Yep.
Mark, if you have to go to football practice, we can handle it from here.
Mark's got
Okay.
priorities, so.
Yeah, if there's any questions, they can email me and I'll get them right to them tomorrow morning.
Okay.
Yeah, absolutely.
Thanks, Mark.
All right, I'll go yell at some young boys.
Good.
Thank you, guys.
Bye. All you folks here in the big room, I just let the breakout rooms know they have about 10 minutes before we bring them back. For you folks in the big room here, people are asking about self-testing cost and how to access them. I have no idea if it's a question you'll be able to answer tonight, but if you can, they will appreciate it.
Julia, do you know if they're asking about self-testing like blood work or if it's water?
I think it's water, and they want to know if the results will be included in the overall island analysis.
Okay.
So yeah, say that again, Julia.
They want to know about the cost and the process for self-testing, self-screening for PFAS and the water, and if those results would be in the overall analysis. So another group is coming back saying there's some testing variability, neighbors with different results over time, and somehow it's impacting. They're concerned about there's a lack of confidence in well testing. Just to prep you guys, if those are things you'll be able to answer when people come back, that'll be great. I don't, the idea tonight is to answer some questions, but we don't expect this to be a pop quiz and this is how good you are at PFAS. This is a lot of information to learn and process here.
So yeah, and some of this information's on the website, but people are just just learning about PFAS and they might not have seen it. But we can certainly point them to some of those resources. And then also talk about the bigger picture as we get test results, how that information can be used. And I do have a couple of questions that were sent in advance that almost seem very similar. Somebody living on a particular road and wanted to know how to get their water tested. So, we have that information on the website. It's if you're not part of the Mass DEP program, then you're gonna, need to pursue it on your own. And we list, several companies that are known to do the work. That kind of thing.
Great.
Chuck, let me know if you want me to chime in on just the sensitivities on doing. Self-testing.
Yeah, no, I think there's an opportunity there. For some good, kind of education. And so if you can speak to that and just, the concern, right? That, hey, if we're testing,
So was that Eric that offered to do that? I'm sorry.
Yep.
Okay. So Eric, I'll when we come back, I'll probably tee that up as the first kind of overview question that we've gotten from the groups. And
just
because go ahead.
Sorry. With the sensitivity question, there are a lot of times labs like Eurofins that does a sample like that they can test to see if there was any additional PFAS from the person themselves. So they do have ways to make sure that it is accurate. And, I know Mass DEP right now is, if you follow the instructions, they will allow the home users to test themselves. They do have those like sample kits that they can test to see if any additional PFAS got into the sample.
And also, sorry, and also about the sensitivity, there is also going to be a natural fluctuation in the PFAS levels, depending on when they test, right? It's going to be different in the summer than it will be in the fall or the winter. So I don't know what kind of variation they were speaking to, but it will vary with the season.
And the plumes, like
and the plumes, there's a lot of variables.
It could change, like we can't say it's always going to be that number.
Yeah, no, all really good points. Yeah, and no, my intent is not to discourage stamping by any means. It's more just to say that it's to make sure that it's done correctly, because little differences in potentially season or just how it's collected can make a big difference.
Yeah, absolutely.
Another question that's come in is what are other communities doing to address non-municipal sources of PFAS? So private wells, how do we find out about them? And what are other communities doing? So I don't know if that's something Eric and others, if you have an answer to, but again, those are some theme questions. We're gonna bring those into the group. Obviously, we've just got 20 minutes to wrap up tonight. So mostly we're culling all of this.
Chuck, that first one, you'll cover the costs and the overall involvement in the program. Is that right?
Yeah, I'll just point them that we have information available, and it's on the website. And Julie, are we going to be following up with some kind of written response to all these, or
Yeah. So what we are going to do, Chuck, is we're going to pull all the questions in for you to give them to you and Eric, or however you're doing that, to maybe add Q&A to your website. Here's the questions that were asked. And then I would imagine too, we will use this to inform future sessions that you do. Like, here's one on self-testing, how to do it. Here's one about finding non-municipal sources or whatever. There is a question that's come up in one of the small groups about firefighters' exposure to PFAS from the foam. And I know somebody has told me that the town is doing something about turnout gear. So if you all might address that also, that's a question that's coming in.
Do you want that Sean, Jamie, we could address the foam and the gear, where we have a grant that will be actually doing analysis on that.
Okay.
But that's with the turnout gear.
Turnout gear, not the foam. Yeah. But
foam,
they're getting different foam, right? Or
we can
at the airport.
We can talk about the foam.
Okay, good. So that would be a good one to answer. So I think what we'll do is I'm probably going to go with maybe those 3 questions, and then we'll see what time looks like. But if we can address self-testing, if we can address non-municipal sources, how do we find out about them and test for them? And then the very specific, what about our firefighters? What are we doing to protect them? That would be great. Thanks. This is great. All right, I'm going to tell the groups they got 2 minutes. Okay, the countdown has begun. People will be, one of the groups is already coming back. I see Kelsey. So in the next 40 seconds, everyone will be back in the big room here, and we will reconvene. Okay, Catherine's back. She just took over. Awesome. We just
Not on
have,
purpose.
that's okay. You're the boss. I'm good.
Take over.
We get no, I'm very happy. We just got one more group. They're going to magically be back here in 23 seconds. That's Teal's group. Bruce, we got your kitchen again. I don't know. Still looks clean though. No, we're worried about what you're going to have for dinner if your kitchen looks that good. So, all right, 3 seconds. Everyone's back. There you are. All right. So what we're going to do is there's kind of 3 themes that have come in from the rooms that I want to have some of our panelists address. And we only have about 20 minutes to wrap things up. So I don't know that we'll have time for more questions than that. The three we were going to try to get to, just so you all know them, are kind of self-testing. What's the accuracy? How do you get them? How much does it cost? Another one is about non-municipal sources of PFAS. And so, you know, where the town doesn't collect them from you all, the public, either through the wastewater treatment plant or at the landfill, kind of how do we find out about those sites? And then the third area is what are we doing for our firefighters, turnout gear, firefighting foam that contains these chemicals. So those are the 3 themes that we're going to ask the panelists to talk about. If there are other questions that you would love us to address, if we have time today, and if the panelists can, you can put those in the chat. All of the information that my colleagues collected during the breakout sessions are going to be packaged. We'll pull them together for the town, and they will add them to the Q&A fact sheet or FAQs on the website. And they'll also inform future meetings, like what should we be focusing on in future meetings. So with that, let's start on the self-testing. And Chuck, were you going to start on that one? But you have to take yourself off mute if you want us to hear you.
Yeah,
right?
thank you. Yeah, no, so testing and resources that are available to the public, that's a good question. We get that question often. So on our PFAS webpage at nantucket-ma.gov, if you click on PFAS and then go to a tab that says private wells, you will find information that includes a list of FAQs with information about testing that is available. We've mentioned the testing that's being done by UMass and Mass DEP that was a free resource made available. At the present time, PFAS testing by homeowners is elective testing that they can decide to do. That information with companies that do the work are available on the website. The costs, don't quote me on this, but you know, I've heard, and again, it depends who draws the sample and you know the timing and you know mobilization. That you know, I've heard test costs of $300 and even higher. So a lot of that really comes down to you know the company that's doing the testing, but that's just like a ballpark, you know, number. So you have that information.
Okay, and I put the website that Chuck just referenced, I put a link in the chat, so you can copy it now if you're interested in looking at that later. And what non-municipal sources? What are other municipalities doing? Eric, were you going to take a stab at that for us?
So non-municipal sources, you know, typically non-municipal, you're thinking about industrial or commercial sources. You know, a lot of manufacturers utilize these chemicals for different processes, like chip manufacturing. You know, the folks that make some of these coats that are stain resistant, water resistant. You know, and actually, some of these manufacturers have already signed call it promises with EPA that they're going to start phasing out some of these compounds. But there's also some of these industries that we're not even aware of that use some of these compounds. So you know, it's a vague answer, but outside of those municipal sources, you know, there are many industries that I would consider candidates.
Okay, and all right, so kind of industrial sites would be the next largest area to find, and on the island, certainly, you know, you've been focused on the municipal site because that makes the most sense.
Yeah, Julia, this is Andy. I can comment on that
Thank you.
because that's what I've been focusing on a little bit more as we've been going through our study. There aren't any true industrial sources on Nantucket, as we all know. However, there may be commercial sources. One of the things that we've been doing is, as we have done our work, various commercial entities or sites, even plane crashes and things come up as possibilities. So we're gathering a list that we are going to be working to keep updated, and at the appropriate time, the town can look into perhaps assessing any of those sites further, or determining whether or not there's an issue in any of them that warrant further investigation. The other thing I should say we're doing as part of our work, I know the specific inquiry was regarding non-municipal sources. I know there was also a separate inquiry on AFFF, but we are going to be working with the fire chief at fire station sites and any storage at the fire department facilities. And we're also going to be attempting, I don't know if we'll get permission or not, but there is some ongoing reach out to private entities that have fuel storage, so that we can work to assess or take a look at their fire suppression systems and see what may have been occurring at those sites. So there is some ongoing reach out to non-municipal sites, and we are trying for now anyway to track and generate a list of things that we hear about that may require or justify further inquiry.
Okay, great. Thank you, Andy. And I see the question from Bruce. We'll make sure we capture that also, Bruce, so that we have it if we don't get to it this evening. The next question is about the firefighter, the turnout gear, the foam, and Jamie or Aisha, or did one of you want to speak to that?
Sure. Well, so it's I would say it's both, really. With the foam, they're very, very low, small levels, can have very, very high concentration levels. Dr. Higgins from University of Colorado said, a 5-gallon bucket of legacy AFFF can contaminate, if it goes directly into your water source, and that's just your drinking water, it can contaminate up to about 20,000 people's drinking water. So small levels can actually have really big impacts. So it actually is very important that we work to finding alternatives which are being developed as we request them. Currently, we are holding on to our foam because if we give it to Mass DP, they are incinerating it, which just basically puts it and disperses it into the air. It doesn't always get rid of it into an environmental justice community typically. So that's where we are with the foam and looking for safer alternatives. The gear also we found out is just PFAS laden. Even the newer gear with what they would call shorter compounds, they have precursors in them. They turn into PFOA, PFOS. So it's actually like a really, really bad situation for our firefighters. And we just got accepted a grant to do before and after, because the town was working with us and was so great to offer us getting alternative gear for the firefighters, which we are working very hard to make sure that we can get our rules and the NFPA to agree to having PFAS-free gear. And then we will be a part of a before and after study with old gear versus new gear and seeing what the PFAS levels, how they drop. Sorry, that was a long way to answer. It's just a loaded topic.
Yeah, no, it's very complicated, and thank you so much for it's great to have such knowledgeable people working on this island wide right here in the group today. So thank you for that. So what I want to do, there was one question that was put in the chat that Bruce, I have sent that to CDM Smith separately as well. So just making sure that that's part of the phase 2 work. So we'll make sure they get back to you on that. Are there any other questions we feel like the panelists could address tonight? I know one comment was about the cost of testing. Chuck, would you kind of address kind of what people might expect when they are looking at self-testing, what the cost might be?
So, right. So we're not directly involved with testing. We don't have a relationship with testing companies. Anecdotally, we've been given information by homeowners in terms of what their experience has been and what the tests are. I've heard, $500 and then even thousands of dollars. So unfortunately, I'm not able to give you a kind of a precise number on that. Maybe Eric, you could speak a little bit to that. A lot of it has to do, with the procedures and the methodology for testing, the QA, the amount of information that's in the testing report, that kind of thing. And then the other thing is that, homeowners are free to do their testing, but we don't necessarily get the information. And there's no requirement that information needs to be provided to the town. But if it is, it goes to the health department, and that information then is available, kept confidentially, but we're able to use it as part of, additional analysis and investigation. Mass DEP, Angela Gallagher is the person that is the point of contact for homeowners. If you've done testing and you have concerns or you need information, going directly to Mass DEP is, the direction that we've been given by them. The town is happy to try to answer questions, provide support, but it's really the individual property owner homeowners that have the responsibility for testing, unless there's an identified release, such as the airport. And, it's a blurry area because sometimes PFAS can come from multiple sources. So it's not as easy as saying, oh, there's PFAS that's been found over here. It's the same thing that's contaminating my drinking water. So there's a lot of detail, a lot of forensics, even this PFAS fingerprinting at a chemical level to try to identify specific sources and types of PFAS and where they might be coming from. So kind of a long-winded answer, but I'll turn it over to Eric to.
Eric? Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, it was well put, Chuck. Typically, when we do these sampling programs, I would expect between 300 and 500 per sample. Where it can go much further, where it can get much more expensive is typically we like to see duplicates and blanks. So that way you have a good understanding of if there's any error in the sampling or if there's any error in your sampling methods. When we're sampling for PFAS, these are at the parts per trillion level. So little things like some of the methods that I've seen used are, you don't launder your clothes for a couple of days before you collect a sample. You want to make sure that the spigot that you collect your sample from doesn't have Teflon tape anywhere in it. Sometimes you go as far as, make sure you haven't cleaned your car recently. Some of them sound silly, but at these part per trillion levels, it does make a difference, which is why, doing multiple samples and duplicates adds a lot of cost, but it adds to the validity of the overall data that you're getting.
Okay. Thank you. We had a question about whether or not the town is able to do any consolidation working with homeowners to lower the cost of self-testing. I don't know if we have an answer to that, but that might be something that the town could look into if we don't have that answer tonight. And then, there's certainly a desire to not reinvent the wheel if the wheel is already out there. But with regards to PFAS, Nantucket also might find itself ahead of the curve in terms of being proactive in addressing this concern on the island. And we will correct the spelling of municipal on the capture here. No problem. Thank you, Roberto. And so we will continue to capture all of these questions. Chuck, may we put your contact information in the chat as who to follow up with if people have questions?
Yes, please do. And
okay. Why don't you do that? If you don't mind, would you just put your how is best for people to get a hold of you? That would be great. And that way you all have his information, and he's kind of the conduit through to CDM Smith. And then of course, he's been working with Lydia and the PFAS action group as well. Lydia, when do you go back to school, or are you going to stay on through the fall?
School is starting very, very soon. So
Okay.
beginning of September, we're back in
right.
action.
So are you just a couple more weeks here in your internship?
I think just about the end of this week.
Okay,
Yep.
so I know you've been a great resource for the town. Any final questions before we wrap things up for this evening? Libby, did you want to make a final remark?
I would just say thank you all very much for taking the time and coming up with really good questions. And I think we, we're spending a lot of time on this, and we want to be responsive to the community. And we don't have, one dedicated PFAS person. So we need help with it. And thanks to Aisha and her group, they've been very helpful. And we're trying to get at this. This is something faced by many towns, if not all towns. Ours is a bit more unique than most, probably. And I guess we're just going to keep forging ahead and try to get some of these questions dealt with.
All right. Well, thank you. Appreciate your all's time and the expertise of everyone who contributed this evening and the care of the community. So I'll look forward to the next conversation. Have a great night.
Thank you.
Thank you
Bye-bye.
all.
Thank you.
Thank you.